Hello and welcome back. You've all done a good job of picking out some very important and interesting bits of the documentary Hell on Wheels. Just as an interesting side note, the director noticed that I had been teaching classes on roller derby and emailed me to come and do a screening and talk about his film at OU. And unfortunately, we weren't able to set a time aside for him to do so. I guess those are booked quite a bit in advance. But I thought it was interesting that he emailed me, and I would have loved to talk to him about his film uh, because to me, it is a very important documentation of the history of the resurgence or the revival of roller derby. And one of the most fascinating aspects, as some of you noted, were the power struggles within this group. Right, you had a group of people who wanted to have all the players involved, and I think one of them might have used the word communist ideals, but they might have meant just as well democratic ideals, meaning that everybody gets a vote in this system. Whereas the CEOs wanted to control everything, um, but really they didn't know how to run a business or really what they were doing when it came to, they weren't paying these players. The players were paying to play, and the CEOs wanted to kind of keep control of the money and everything. And of course, that doesn't work out. A lot of your flat track derby comes from that split. Um, and part of the reason that flat track derby is more democratic is because you don't have to have someone to invest in one of those large banked tracks, right? You just need a flat bit of concrete to be able to play, and that way it can be more democratic and people can all chip in without having to have an investor. Um, so I think it was a very interesting point in roller derby history, the revival of everything. But I wanted to point out a couple things um, that really I have only been familiar with roller derby in the past 3 or 4 years. But the roller derby that I'm familiar with is even quite a bit different than is depicted in Hell on Wheels. And a few things. A lot of you mentioned the penalty spins with the really uh, sometimes over the line things that the girls would do to draw in a crowd. Those, to my knowledge, aren't done anymore in roller derby leagues. There may be some leagues that still do that type of penalty thing and win a date and that sort of stuff, but most of the leagues that I know around Oklahoma and Texas now are staunchly against that sort of thing because they see it as detracting from the sport. They see roller derby is fundamentally a sport um, and should be entertaining as a sport. Now, that being said, the outfits and the roller derby names and that sort of stuff are still a big part of the culture, but some of that kind of um, exploitive stuff that is problematic, I would say, and some of you pointed that out, isn't really a part of the culture anymore. Another thing that isn't part of the culture, as far as I'm aware, in the leagues I'm aware of, is the fake fighting. Um, they scripted that for entertainment and to drawing crowds and stuff. But uh, to my knowledge, the leagues don't do any kind of fake fighting or anything like that. Again, because they want to see this as a serious sport and not just entertainment. Less worldwide wrestling and more actual wrestling, if you want to use that analogy, so an actual sport. A number of you pointed out that there was a lot to do with feminism, and that feminism made this resurgence of the sport possible, and I completely agree with you. The first class that I taught on roller derby was focused solely on feminism and roller derby. I came from the angle of a group of scholarship called Feminist Sports Studies, and we looked at the history of roller derby from that lens. Now, one of you mentioned the proclamation by one of the, by the skaters about race not really mattering in roller derby cultures, and I think they are roller derby culture is accepting of diversity, but I still think that race does matter in these cultures because, like I said before, roller derby culture is not completely removed from the culture outside, which so those problems are still going to be seen in roller derby culture. So great discussion about the revival, and I want you for next time, for Tuesday night, I want you to read the chapter in Kevin Hilton's book. I want you to read the one called Critical Race Theory. It's the chapter titled Critical Race Theory. I also want you to read an interview with a derby skater who was from Portland at the time of this interview. There is a link to it on the content tab, and it's called the February 2012 featured skater White Flight. So read the Critical Race Theory chapter in the Kevin Hilton book. Read the interview. It's a fairly short interview with White Flight. And then we're going to have a Dropbox assignment. And in the Dropbox assignment, it is typed out. The question is typed out. But I want you to connect some point that Hilton makes in the chapter to anything we've watched or read so far. Now, as always, your answer should be at least a half a page and should be clear and thoughtful. And one of the easy connections to make, right, is between the chapter in Critical Race Theory and the interview with White Flight. I think there are a number of connections to be made there, but I don't want to make it where you can't make those other connections. So as long as you connect a point made in the chapter to anything we've read or watched so far, including the interview with White Flight, then you'll have fulfilled the assignment. All right, so great work, and we're nearing the end of the semester. One thing that I haven't mentioned up until now, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to schedule this, I am setting up an interview with a derby player from the Oklahoma City team, and what we're going to do on Thursday is to develop some questions for her. She is of Puerto Rican descent, and I think we can get a lot of great information for the class if we ask her questions about her experience in roller derby, because she's been playing for a number of years. But I'll give you more details about that here in a day or two. All right, I will see you all next time.